Today, I'm going to be installing Proxmox on a computer inside my local network. I'm going to be using it for some Homelab-y things. If you're not familiar with Proxmox, all it is an operating system that's based on Debian Linux, and you can use it to install virtual machines and LXC containers. So if this is something you're interested in, come take this ride with me. So this is the system I'm going to be installing Proxmox on. It's nothing fancy. It's a retired Lenovo workstation PC. It's pretty low power. I got it for a little more than the cost of a Raspberry Pi. And it's got a 4-core processor, 4 threads. I've got 16 gigs of RAM installed on it, a 256 gigabyte SATA drive, and that's it. So this is the system I'm going to be installing Proxmox on today. But first I want to boot into the BIOS. We want to make sure that the settings here are correct so that you can install virtual machines. And right here at the top you can see SVM mode is enabled. That's the one that we need to use for this particular processor, but there are sometimes different labels for different processor manufacturers, so Intel versus AMD, and I think even some different generations of AMD processors will use a different label for this. So you're going to have to dig through the BIOS settings to make sure that you find the proper CPU configuration to allow virtualization. You may or may not have to do this. I believe that newer processors will have this automatically enabled, but it's something that if you can't get your virtualization to work, you may need to double check. So it's working fine on this one. I'm going to reboot, and then we're going to go to the installer. And to do that, I'm going to have to go to the boot menu. Alright, here we go. Entering boot menu. Now on mine, I've got a virtual CD-ROM drive that I'm using with a Pi KVM system. But if you don't have that, there are tools to install Linux ISOs onto USB sticks. You can use Rufus. I've used that before. It works really well. There's Balena Etcher. That works really well. My favorite is probably Ventoy, because you can have multiple ISOs on a single stick and boot from it directly using this exact same boot menu here. But in this case, I'm going to go off of my Pi KVM. So it's going to boot into the graphical installer here, and then we'll install Proxmox. Okay, so we're booted into the installer here. We have to agree to the license agreement. I'm just going to use the standard options because I only have a single hard disk on here. So I'm going to be using the base ext4 file system, as much of the hard drive as I can use. And we're going to proceed. So you have to type in your country. I'm Canadian, so I have to put this in here, and I'm in the Edmonton region. There we go. Have to create a password. This is going to be for your root user once you've got it installed, and then you have to use I would recommend using a real email in here. Just like that. Now you are required to give a host name, so I'm going to call this Homelab. And then you need to put in your IP address. For some reason this isn't even on the right network, so I'm going to enter this in manually. I even have a DHCP reservation set up for this system, but for some reason it didn't load up. So I'll have to manually enter these things in. There we go. And then we'll just install. And once this is installed, the system will automatically reboot. And then we can move to a browser to complete the setup. Okay, so now Proxmox is installed on the system, and in order to continue our setup, we're going to have to navigate to this address in a browser. So that's what I'm going to do now. So I booted up my browser here, and I navigated to the address given on the last screen, and this is the first thing we see. It's this scary message: your connection is not private. The only reason this is happening is because we're using a self-signed certificate for the encryption of the traffic on this address. It's perfectly safe, I hope, to log in here. But when you accept, you'll get this boot screen here, and you have to log in as root using that password that you used during the install. And we're basically ready to start using Proxmox. There's a few things that I would set up here first. Because I don't have a license for this, we're going to want to go to repositories here. Right now, there you want to go to the enterprise repositories for packages. But we don't have a license, so we want to go to, oh, look at this, no subscription. We want to go to the no subscription repository. Let's add that. What else have we got here? Right, we've got the Ceph repository. I probably won't use that, but I'll add it anyway. And then I will disable the enterprise one because I don't have a subscription for it anyway. Right here, disable. Now, if we do updates, let's refresh this, and we'll see if we get the new packages. They say that this is not acceptable for enterprise use, or production use, I think is what they use on here. Repositories. Yeah, not recommended for production use. This is my Homelab. I'm not production. And since I am playing as if I'm an administrator, just for the record, I don't work in IT in any capacity. I'm just a guy who likes playing with my computers. I'm going to add a new user here. Add user, Hardwood Homelab. And we gotta create a password for this user. And type it again. I don't need any of this information. Is this information correct? Yes. Now I want to add this user to the sudo group, but we don't have a sudo group on here, so I'm gonna see if I can install that. apt install sudo. Perfect. Now I need to add my user mod to the sudo group. Perfect. That should add my user to sudoers. I also need to add my user on here. Sure, we'll add this so that I can use my user to sign in to the web console here. And I want to give this user some permissions, so let's go add user permission. I'm going to give myself root access because I'm the only super user on here. I'll select my user and we'll put him on the administrator role. Add. There's another thing I'd like to do. I want to have this system bootable remotely. I have this system down in my basement. I live typically upstairs, and I am so lazy, I don't want to take stairs. So I'm going to add a service that will make this system bootable by Wake-On-Lan every time it starts. I've seen other videos that say that you can do it by just adding a setting in the network configuration, but I find it doesn't work. It typically will work once and then never again. So in order to make it stick, I've found I have to make a service file. So let's go systemd/system, and I'm going to call this Wake-On-Lan.service. And I've done this before and I have it in my notes. And since I am the worst for typos, I'm just going to paste it in there. And all this does, this is my network device. It's going to run the ftools binary, I guess, against this network, and then it's going to make it Wake-On-Lan enabled. So write it, and then we're going to go systemctl CTL. There's those typos I was talking about. Daemon reload, I believe it is. Reload. Oh, I still spelled it wrong. Systemctl daemon reload, and then we're gonna go systemctl enable Wake-On-Lan.service, and we're gonna make that enabled now so it runs it. So now the system should be bootable using a magic packet, a Wake-On-Lan packet. So what I'm gonna do is update this, and I'm going to shut the system down. Well, I've got to do some troubleshooting there. For some reason I cannot connect to all the repositories. In the meantime, there's one other thing I wanted to address, and this is the reason why I created another user. I want to restrict SSH access to the root user. This is just in my local network, so I'm sure it's perfectly safe, but for some reason having SSH access to root just sets my teeth on edge. So I'm going to change the settings here to the SSH config so that we will not allow root access. Here we go, permit root login. We want to set this to no. And then we'll try and update this again, and I will shut down the system so we can do a reboot, and we're going to test the Wake-On-Lan. Well, I don't know what happened there, but as soon as I stopped recording, my update went perfectly. And so I shut the system down. Right now we're looking at the local output of the machine, and I'm going to try sending a Wake-On-Lan magic packet and see if this system will boot. And we'll see if that service file worked as intended. So I just sent it. And it looks like it's working. Hooray! Alright, so I've got Proxmox installed. I've got it updated. I've proven that I've got my Wake-On-Lan working. The last thing I've got to check out is the permissions of my user. So I'm going to sign in now. And okay, I'm on the shell, so I'm going to sign in here. I'm going to check my sudo permissions. Oh, and it looks like that's working. So I should be able to administer this from SSH using my user. Looks like I've got the ability to create a VM. That looks good. Looks like I've got the permissions to create a container as well. I've got access to my local file system. Everything is looking good. So this is how I wanted to set up my system, and that's how I'm going to leave it for today.